Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Assessing Your Farm for the Future, the first in our spring webinar series. I'm very grateful that you've managed to join us this evening. I apologise for dragging you in from such a sunny evening, but I hope that you will find this evening informative. Just basic reminders on meeting etiquette. It would be grateful if you could remain muted during the speaker sessions, and it does help for delivery to have your video off as well. There is the chat function for asking questions, or please do put your hand up and we will take those questions at the end in a roundup from both sessions. We just wanted to start this evening's meeting before we have the presentation from our guest speaker, Becky Wilson from the Farm Carbon Toolkit. We'll be talking on carbon footprint on your farm and the importance of understanding and the potential for utilising your farm carbon. We just wanted to cover off on the changes for BPS 2021 and an update on the future of farm support going forward now we've entered this period of agricultural transition. So the first thing to cover is the changes to the greening rules. So from 2021, now we're under domestic legislation having left the EU. The three greening requirements have been removed. So the first of those is crop diversification. This was the requirement for having capped amounts of certain crops, the three crop rule as it might be known. So that has been removed this year. You are still required to submit your land uses, and I would remind people that it's quite important to make sure those are correct, because there is an overlay there with stewardship, should you be in stewardship, and some other implications. So it's important to still enter your land uses when you're completing your BPS. The second part of that is the ecological focus areas, the EFAs. They have also been removed, but be sure to take into account cross-compliance rules when it comes to buffer zones. Those are still needed. And lastly, the permanent grassland requirements. There again, although that rule has been removed for greening, you still need to bear in mind that you probably will need to complete an environmental impact assessment should you want to take grassland out of permanent grassland. We've also had the removal of the entitlement usage requirement. So that was the requirement that entitlements be used in a two-year period. That's been removed. And you can also now submit additional information and make certain changes to your claim, BPS claim, up to the 11th of June without penalty, as long as you have made a submission by the 15th of May. There have been some significant changes to the way that they are going to approach inspections and penalties, which sound quite positive. It's hoped that inspectors will be more understanding and more helpful on their visits. They will be in touch beforehand to tell you what kind of records they're going to be wanting on your visits and to give you a list of information that they're required when they attend. And should they come across any issues, the first point of contact is going to be a warning letter as opposed to leaping straight to penalties. And the hope is also that any penalties, should they be needed, will be more proportionate. But the focus is definitely going to be more on working with farmers to achieve the right thing rather than penalising you for not getting the black and white answers right. But probably most crucially, and really what's led us to engage on this series of webinars, is the changes that are coming to direct payments themselves. So progressive reductions starting this year. These are being implemented in a system comparable to tax tiers, percentage depending on your payment level. And as I say, the first element is this year, the first time you'll see reductions. That they're going to be going down over the next period up to 2027, when ultimately they will be removed. And a reminder also that the submission deadline is the 17th of May this year. So the transition period, what does that mean for farmers? Well, so we're entering a period of change. There's going to be some changes to the grants and the support that's going to be available. Countryside stewardship is going to continue to be available in its current format, though, under domestic legislation. So there are some changes to the prescriptions of the options, and again, also how those are administered by DEFRA. But you will be able to apply for countryside stewardship and go into those 5 or 10-year agreements up until the last application year will be 2023 for a start in 2024. There is some suggestion that the dates for applications on those may alter slightly. and they'll be less timetabled. So it might almost be like a rolling application, but more information on that will probably come out in the near future. There's going to continue to be an option for productivity grants in different guises, along the lines of the CPSG, the small grants systems that they've run for 3 years now, but with additional options, it's hoped this year, so extending those to include other forms of kit and other options that are useful to farmers, alongside larger grants for things like reservoirs, processing, in excess of 25,000. And there's going to be a new grant scheme as well, the Farming and Protected Landscape Scheme. This is going to apply to areas that are in national parks or AUMBs, so that will apply to the island. There's very little information what that's actually going to involve, but there seems to be a bit of a focus there on access and diversification, but it's going to be quite locally led. So engaging with the Isle of Wight AUMB team is probably going to be quite crucial in that. But all of that's expected to come online and be available through 2021, or at least information on what's going to be available through 2021. Ahead of also consultations that are likely this year around the lump sum exit schemes and delinking, and what that's actually going to involve and look like for farmers. But again, unfortunately, with timetabling, that seems to have been delayed. Other investment grants, including animal health and welfare and the slurry investment scheme for updating slurry storage, are also expected to be launched for 2022. The new entrance scheme, which has got a focus on new entrants from inside and outside of farming accessing land, more information on that is also expected in 2022 for a launch of that scheme. The lump sum exit payments, just to go back to those, it was expected that they would be available for application during 2022, whilst the delinking won't actually take effect until 2024. So the difference between those is that the lump sum exit payment would be looks to be suggested to be a drawdown for farmers to take a forward payment of future BPS to exit the industry. Quite what exit means, we're not quite sure. Alternative delinking would be that you would continue to claim your BPS payments, obviously as it goes down, but you would continue to pay those payments, but the link between the claim and land would be broken. So effectively you could still claim payment even though you might not actively be farming it yourself. But the big new part to farm support is ELMs. So I feel very much that there's been a bit of a misconception by some that ELMs is going to replace BPS, which really is not the case. ELMs is going to be public money for public goods. It's going to be very important for us as an industry to justify why we deserve this public money. And there are going to be cost implications to a lot of the options that are going to be available under ELMs. But it breaks down into to 3 schemes, effectively. So the first of those is the Sustainable Farming Incentive. This will pay for farmers to do things on their land, to manage their land in an environmentally sustainable way. The intention is that this will be open to all farmers and accessible by all farmers. There's currently a pilot scheme that was open for expressions of interest up until the middle of April. It was only open to those that weren't already in any form of stewardship. The intention is that the 2022 scheme, the information for that will be coming out later this year, and that will be open to all BPS claimants. And the government are very much hoping that people engage with that as a starting point to the new sort of schemes of payment. There's still a lot of information needed about how that will work, what is actually required. It breaks down into 3 levels within that one scheme. So you'll be able to choose kind of the level of interaction that you want to have with that scheme and how much you want to do. But and then there will be some capital elements to support the actions in those schemes. But it will be a very much farmer-led and farm-based plan on how to deliver that. The next level is the Local Nature and Recovery Fund. This will pay land managers for the likes of habitat restoration, but it will be very locally directed about what's important to your region or your area and the priorities there. Again, this will be open to all farmers and other land managers, and is expected to launch in 2024, though we very much hope more information on that will be coming out in 2021-22. But it will be very, very environmentally led. The suggestion that it will be along the lines of a sort of an extended countryside stewardship, perhaps, but let's say much more information still needed on that. And the same for the top tier of ELMs, the Landscape Recovery Fund, which will be large landscape delivered projects, perhaps including rewilding, but again open to all, but is going to cover large landscape projects. There's been some talk, obviously, of cluster farms projects, which could be delivered either under the local natural recovery or potentially under the landscape recovery scheme. So that's kind of it, really. So going to, I'm just going to get back to the first one. So moving on from there, we're very pleased to have Becky Wilson from the Farm Carbon Toolkit to talk to us on farm carbon and your footprint. So thanks very much. I will hand over to Becky.